Good evening. My name is Justin Bean, and I am the Membership and Outreach Manager here at the Zeckelman Holocaust Center. I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's program, especially our museum members and donors. Your support allows us to host programs like this at no charge, and we are so grateful for your generosity. To learn more about membership or to make a donation, please visit our website, holocaustcenter.org. A special thank you to our community partner, Oakland Community College, Culinary Studies Institute, and to our program sponsors, Eric Billis, Robin and Leo Eisenberg, Patricia and Daniel Frank, Gary Cappy, Faye and Leon Siegel, Janelle Constam and Stuart Teeger, and Alana and Abraham Varkovitsky. I would now like to introduce our special guest, Becca Gallick-Mitchell. Becca is a third-generation Holocaust educator, recipe blogger, and the founder of InstaGrandma's Kitchen website and Instagram account. She is the proud granddaughter of Holocaust survivors Mala Weintraub Dorfman and Henry Dorfman of blessed memory. Through their tireless efforts in the 1970s and early 80s, Mala and Henry were instrumental in the founding of the Holocaust Memorial Center. Henry would go on to serve as a chairman of the center's executive committee and then as board president. We are truly grateful for everything that Mala and Henry and their family did and continues to do in support of Holocaust education. Becca is with us tonight to share Mala's Kopytkas recipe and stories from Mala's incredible life. We at the Holocaust Center were deeply saddened by Mala's passing earlier this month, and we are honored to be hosting this program in her memory. After Becca's cooking demonstration, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Please write your questions in the Q&A section located at the bottom of your screens. If you have a question as Becca is cooking, please type in the question and she will try to answer it as time allows. Welcome, Becca, and thank you so much for being our guest this evening.
Thank you so much, Justin, for that truly humbling introduction. Thank you to the Zeckelman Holocaust Center for having me, and to the Culinary Studies Institute at OCC for helping to make this program possible. And thank you all for joining. I'm truly speechless. Providing programs like these is so vital to me and who I am, because it connects me to and it honors the legacies of my beloved Grandma Mala of blessed memory, who miraculously survived the war, and her mom, Esther, who is also of blessed memory, who tragically passed. I'd like you to meet these two incredible women. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Oh my gosh, it's not, of course, best laid plans. I had it open and it's not open. This is where my grandma would say, man tracht, ve God lacht. Man tries or plans and God laughs. So just give me a second to compose myself and to get this started. I'm just going to. I'm so sorry. This is my grandma Mala. Mala Dorfman, born Malka Weintraub. Like Justin said, she recently passed, and I was really blessed. I am one of the luckiest people I've ever known, because I got to have her for 32 years. And because of that, I really always will for the whole rest of my life. She was the epitome of grace. She was dignified. She was philanthropic. She was a true leader without ever I don't think she ever thought of herself that way, but that's really what she was. She was an educator. She taught a class at the University of Miami in Florida. And she would host a student or two every single semester who was taking Holocaust studies, and they would come to her apartment every week and they would talk about her story for an entire semester. She obviously was a Holocaust survivor, but not just because of that, but because of who she was. She was just such an inspiration to everybody and anybody overcoming trauma. She really did not let it define her, although she made space for it. And she held her head high. She was a really, truly special individual, and one who really honored her mom's legacy. So I'd like you to meet Esther. She was also an incredibly dignified woman. She was so well put together. She never left her bedroom without her sheitel or wig on. And my grandmother never saw her without it. She never saw her without her entire aesthetic before she would emerge. She never saw her in her dressing gown. She only ever saw her totally put together. She was a supremely impressive person. She was ahead of her time. She was in charge of the finances, not just for the family, but also for their business. And she was an artist. She was cultured. She was funny and she was wise, and she was an incredible home cook, which brings me to her recipes. She demonstrated love with food. She was the mother of 7. Only 3 reached adulthood, unfortunately. But she showed them how she loved them with her food. And it's something my grandma did, and it's something I do. And today I'd like to teach you her Kopytkas with mushroom gravy. It was a staple in their home pre and post-war. It's now a staple in mine. And Kopytkas, for everybody who doesn't know what they are a Polish potato pasta dumpling. It's kind of like gnocchi, but it's shaped differently. And the mushroom gravy is a very savory, incredibly umami flavored gravy that is so delicious. And I make it not just for Kopytkas. It screams Grandma Mala. So without further ado, let's talk about these recipes in earnest. The Kopytkas require So the Kopytkas require 2 pounds of Yukon Gold potatoes, ideally. Any potato will do, but ideally Yukon Gold. They have a better texture when mashed or made into gnocchi or Kopytkas. I like to pre-chop them into about the same size. You want them to cook evenly. So I've pre-chopped them just to kind of save a little bit of time. I store them in water so that they don't brown. So I'm just gonna dump the water. And we've got 2 pounds of potatoes. We also need a cup of all-purpose flour, at least. If you have newer potatoes, you're gonna need more. I just bought my potatoes yesterday, so I'm gonna need definitely more than a cup of flour, but it kind of depends. And you have to do it by feel. It's why recipes are a little difficult. We need 1 egg, about 3 tablespoons of kosher salt, give or take. Some people like more, some people like less. And then chopped chives, optionally for garnish, and chopped dill, which I guess could be optional, but for me, it's really not. It is so grandma. I have a cousin who, whenever he smells dill, he thinks of Grandma Mala. So then the mushroom gravy requires, sorry about this. Okay, so I use schmaltz because I like it to be authentic. You can use any neutral oil. I like avocado oil if I'm not using schmaltz. You need a pound of assorted mushrooms. Whatever you have available is fine. They don't even need to be assorted. It's just the button mushrooms that we get in America would not have been available at the time in Poland. 2 small yellow onions. Again, I have pre-diced the onions into, you know, it's not an even dice. It's pretty rustic. 3 cloves of garlic, roughly chopped, again, give or take. Half a teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and a pinch of sugar. And you're gonna need a little pinch of salt when you're cooking the onions and the mushrooms as well. So let's start boiling the potatoes. You want them to go into water or into a pot and then fill with water just to cover. And you want it to be cold. So then you turn it on like high or medium high to bring it to a boil. And then once it's boiling, actually, you know what, I'm gonna leave it uncovered. Once it's boiling, you wanna keep it boiling. The total amount of time from now until it'll be done is about 20 minutes. And we're also going to salt this water a little bit. And we're going to salt this water a little bit, maybe a little more than this one. The water on the right is going to be for the Kopytkas themselves. I'm just going to get the water boiling now so that we don't have to wait later. So I'm just going to cover that, but not fully. And then you need, oh, I didn't even get it out. You'll need a skillet. Running out of space on my stove. We'll put, all right, so we'll put this, oh gosh, the skillet won't fit. The skillet goes in front. So the skillet's gonna be for the mushrooms and the onions and the garlic. And we want that to be on medium high. I'm gonna have it on high because it's a small burner and a big skillet. So you put 1 tablespoon of schmaltz right in, or oil, same amount if you're using oil. And you want that to cook until it's rippling. So that's the technical term for it. My memories of Kopytkas are always, they always revolve around the holidays because that's really when we had them. I'm not sure if they had them every night or just for Shabbats or just for Yom Tovs. I would assume it was just for the holidays because that's really when they made that for us. But it was always with the mushroom gravy. There was never Kopytkas with any other sauce or gravy or seasoning. It was always Kopytkas with mushroom gravy. So I can assume that that's, again, how my Grandma Esther, great Grandma Esther, I'm gonna try not to do it, but in my home, I call her Grandma Esther because she never really got to be a grandma. So that's what we refer to her as. But great Grandma Esther, I think, would have always made it with the mushroom gravy. And why not? Because it's so delicious. So it's rippling. So we're going to cook the garlic, which is roughly chopped. It's, again, it's rustic. It's not gonna, you're not gonna see it, and it doesn't need to win me prizes. It just needs to be delicious. So we're gonna put that in and cook it for about a minute. It's gonna continue to cook with the other things in it. I like the way it tastes before the onions go in.
Question from the audience.
Oh, we have a question from the audience. Pardon? How many potatoes? So I weigh it. You can buy sacks of potatoes. I ended up needing, I think, 5 potatoes. It doesn't have to be exact. They were probably this size, if that helps. I'm not sure it does. So we're gonna cook the garlic for about a minute. And then we're going to add the onions. The onions are gonna release some moisture. So this is why I like to put the garlic in first. We have another question from the audience, I see. Yeah, Paul?
Clarify how many pots you need. So it's 2 pots and just 1 split.
So yeah, I have another pot because I'm gonna use it for the gravy later, but you don't need to use another pot. I just don't really have the time to wash them. So normally I would not be using 3 pots. 2 pots and 1 skillet should be just fine. So the garlic is looking good. It's a little toasty, but it's not too brown. So we're going to add the onions now. Oh my gosh, already it's smelling like grandma's kitchen. Onions and garlic, there's just something about it. And it's another thing, it's just, it transcends cultures, it transcends continents. Onions and garlic, there's something about it. It's just delicious. Okay, so we're gonna cook that off for another probably 2 minutes. I didn't actually grow up learning these recipes. I had to ask grandma about these recipes when I was older because I think kind of like it was for her when she was younger, her mom would just kind of take over. My grandma and her 2 sisters would just kind of take over. They did all of the cooking and we did none of it. We just played. They would quell seeing us eat, but it was a bit of a mystery until I started asking. But they did help to clean. And my grandma said that when she got older, she started to help with the cooking. And there were 7 of them. So it was really a joint effort for every Friday, every holiday. Obviously, there are numerous in our religion. So she had a lot of opportunities to watch her mom make these recipes and also to be a part of it. So with the onions, we're gonna put in the paprika, the black pepper, and a little pinch of salt. I like more salt. Grandma liked less salt. So, cater it to your preferences. If you're making it for people you're not sure about, always add less salt than more salt. People can always add it themselves. That was grandma's philosophy. I think it's something I'm still working on, to be totally honest. So we're gonna let that go for another couple minutes. My grandma was 15 years old when the Nazis invaded Poland. So she was pretty young, honestly, when she stopped seeing these recipes in her mom's kitchen. And it's a real miracle that between her and her 2 sisters that they were able to recreate all of it. And we have this cultural lexicon in the form of food in our family. It's pretty remarkable. So at this point, we're going to put in except for that one, all of the mushrooms. Classic Becca moment, if you know me. If you don't, now you do. Let's see. We're just gonna give it a little bit of a stir, but we don't want to stir it too much A lot of people stir too much and it doesn't get that Maillard reaction, which is like the browning of the food. Not caramelization, but similar effect, I guess. And we're gonna just kind of let that go for like 5-7 minutes. It's gonna release a lot of moisture as well. So you don't have to worry as much about it burning as you do about the garlic.
Can you just reiterate what's in the skillet?
Sorry, we have another question.
Can you just reiterate what's in the skillet?
So in the skillet, we have garlic, schmaltz. Actually, I was gonna put a little more schmaltz in for the mushrooms, so I'm gonna do that now. Just kind of stir them around. It'll melt, so we'll be able to distribute it when we give it a nice stir. All right.
What else?
So for everybody who doesn't know, the voice in the background is my husband. So thank you so much, Paul, for helping with the questions.
What else is in the skillet?
What else is in the skillet? Right. So it is, at this point, we've got schmaltz or oil, garlic, onion, mushrooms, and a pinch of salt, half a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and a teaspoon of paprika. So the mushrooms are just gonna do their thing. Like I said, my grandma was 15 when the war broke out in September of 1939. She remembered so vividly watching the Nazis not skip a beat and stomp through the streets, grabbing Jewish men by the beards, chopping them off, chopping off the payas, the curly hair on the sides of their heads, and throwing babies out of windows. Her mom was terrified, of course. And she took my grandma and her 3 younger siblings to Kopytkas, which was a town a little bit east of Lodz, where my grandma grew up. And she took them to her grandmother, her mom's bakery. So my grandma's bakery in Kopytkas. She thought that because it was a smaller town, it would be free of the Nazis. Unfortunately, the Lodz ghetto was invaded on September 8th, and the Kopytkas, or sorry, the Lodz ghetto. Lodz was invaded on September 8th, and Kopytkas was invaded on September 9th. So there was no respite, unfortunately. Pretty soon after arriving in Kopytkas, my great-grandmother Esther stopped hearing from her 2 older daughters and her husband in Lodz. So she went back, and that was the last time my grandmother ever saw her mom. She ended up getting some training and becoming a nurse in the ghetto hospital in Kopytkas, where she met a man who was elderly, and he had soiled himself, and he was crying out for help, and nobody would help him. And he obviously was in despair and had been that way for quite some time. My grandma took pity, and she helped him. She cleaned him up. She changed his bed. She got him fresh. And he said to her that she was going to survive the war, and she was going to live a very long and very prosperous life. And she really truly believes in her bones that he was an angel, or he was a prophet, or he was something, because she passed 2.5 weeks ago at 98 years old, and he couldn't have been more right. So my grandma ended up getting appendicitis in September of 1942, and she required surgery immediately. They didn't have the capacity to treat her in the ghetto hospital, so she was transported to the hospital for non-Jews in Kozhenitz, outside the ghetto, and she had emergency surgery. While she was waking up, groggy from anesthesia, she overheard in German, which was a language she happened to know from childhood. She overheard nurses talking, saying that the Nazis were going to exterminate all of the Jews in the ghetto and in the hospitals the next day, on September 27th, 1942. So she, like I said, still groggy from anesthesia, took her jacket off of the chair and she fled. She went as far as her legs could carry her and fell asleep in a barn. Unfortunately, she had wandered back into the ghetto without realizing it. So the following morning, she was rounded up as part of a selection. Now, just for a moment, we're going to pause. The mushrooms look excellent. So we're going to take them off the heat. I'm actually just going to take a little trivet and set them aside. We're just going to check. Sorry, Paul has a question.
How are the mushrooms cut?
How are the mushrooms cut? So that's really a personal preference. I cut each mushroom differently. If you spotlight the cooking view, you can see that there's a real assortment. We've got the button mushrooms are sliced through the center. Some of the mushrooms are whole. We've got some mushrooms like the shiitakes that are also sliced through the center, and some that are sliced kind of lengthwise. So I like to have an assortment. I think it gives it added texture and appeal.
And there's no other fluid added apart from this one?
No other fluid. All the fluid comes from the mushrooms and the onions. Are there any other questions? No, we're good. Okay. So we're just going to, I'm gonna leave camera for a second. Get a fork, and we're gonna check on the potatoes. So what you want from the potatoes, I can already tell these aren't ready. They feel hard when I move the fork around. So we're gonna let them continue cooking. You want them to be fork tender, not knife tender, because a knife is going to pierce something that's harder than a fork would. And you want it to, so fork tender really means that you put a fork through it and then you lift it and it slides right off the fork without you having to wiggle. So that's the goal. You can unspotlight the cooking view for now. Thank you so much. So she was part of a selection, right? That's where we left off. So my grandma did not have anything on. She had a hospital gown. She had staples in her abdomen. She probably looked like a dead woman walking. And somehow they were like, oh, she looks like she can work. So they sent her to the right. A miracle. And she went to Gorzycki, which was a labor camp where she ended up digging ditches. She says seemingly for no reason. I don't think that, in my research, it doesn't seem to pan out that it was for no reason, but I could totally understand why she would feel that way. She remembers digging it, putting it one side, digging it, putting it back. So, I mean, who am I to argue with her? She did that for about 4 or 5 weeks before she was transported again to Skarżysko Kamienna, which was notoriously one of the most brutal and horrifying of the working concentration camps. She had no, formal medical care or informal medical care up until that point. So she had a pretty horrifying, disgusting oozing wound. She from her training as a nurse, she knew what would befall her if it left, she left it untreated. And miraculously, at Skarżysko-Kamienna, she was tasked to assemble bullets in an ammunition factory owned by Hasag. And she had a seemingly sympathetic capo. Sorry, not capo, but she was actually a Nazi. Her name was Gertrude Hoffman, a name Grandma Mala would never forget. She said to Gertrude in perfect German, "I need your help. I have this wound." She explained to her what had happened to her and that she was going to die of sepsis. To everybody's utter surprise, Gertrude took her home with her. She smuggled her out of the camp and she took her home with her and she bathed her and she taught her to use her urine in her hair so that she wouldn't get lice. And she tended to her wound and she fed her and she tried to give her false papers and get her out of Poland to Kessel, Germany, where Gertrude was from. And Grandma said no. She said that I've lived as a Jew. I'm going to die as a Jew. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody else. So I want you to smuggle me back into the camp. Can you imagine? All right, let's just pause. We're gonna take a breath and we're just gonna check on the potatoes again. All right, see what I mean? It's not falling. It's not falling off the fork. So it needs a little bit of needs a little bit more time and not to fall into the flame. Grandma Mala spent 2 years at Skarżysko-Kamienna. Gertrude was phenomenal to her. She gave her the supplies once she brought her back into the camp. She gave her the supplies regularly to tend to her wounds until they healed, and they healed quite well because of it. She made sure all the women in her command were safe when they were with her. But she couldn't always keep them safe, of course. And after a brutally long shift, 20-hour shift, my grandma was asked by a male Nazi guard upon leaving the factory to get into a shower. And she said that her legs couldn't hold her any longer. And she said no, and she couldn't do it. She said no. And as her punishment, he put her into a rat-infested bunker. And they were starving rats, and he closed it and locked it and left her in there for 24 hours. And she had to clutch on to a pipe that was exposed on the ceiling and hang from the pipe with her feet above the ground so that the rats wouldn't feast on her flesh for 24 hours. And she exited the bunker the next day and had to go straight back into another shift without sleeping. And all of her friends in her who worked with her didn't even recognize her. Her hair had turned white overnight. And of course, because she learned about the using urine to avoid lice, she had all of her hair. And somehow it all went white. And she had to dye her hair for many years after that, after she survived. Let's check on the potatoes again. I'm having a hard time getting one on the fork, which sometimes is a good sign. It means that they're just falling off. But I just want to be totally sure. So we're just gonna, yep. Well, that one's a little, But the other ones won't even stay on the fork. So we're just gonna hope that one keeps cooking with its residual heat. So what we do next is we carefully, with an oven mitt preferably, we take this off the stove and we pour all the water through a colander into a bowl so that you save it because you want that water. But you don't want the potatoes to still sit in the water. So that's why you've got the colander, and then you need another bowl to nestle them in so that they can drain all the water off. Otherwise, you're gonna need even more flour, even if they're old potatoes. So what I like to do at this point, just to save time, I'm gonna put that water over here, and I'm going to take a spoon and just create a little well in the center. And that's gonna give a little more air around the potatoes. In the interest of saving time, I'm gonna throw mine in the fridge for the next 5 minutes. Probably should have planned to make room in the fridge. All right, next time I will. And then yeah, just 5 minutes, it'll chill it enough. You don't want to put the egg in when it's hot because it's just gonna cook the egg. You don't want that. You don't want lumpy Kopytkas. So on another occasion, Grandma left another unusually long shift. And I'm not sure if it was the same Nazi guard, but it doesn't really matter. A Nazi guard asked her to move an impossibly big boulder that he knew she was never going to be able to move. And she tried as she might, but she was not able to do it. And he beat her over the head with his weapon. She said that was just the tip of the iceberg. Those are the stories that we heard, but the mundane everyday life of living in that environment was soul crushing. And she would literally just spend that time daydreaming about the smells that we're enjoying right now. Oh, we've got a question. Okay.
If someone has already drained the potatoes and haven't kept the water,
That's fine. Don't worry. We're gonna have some options for that. So the reason that you keep the water is it has this beautiful potato starch in it. It means that the gravy doesn't need anything else to thicken it. Of course, there are other things that you can use to thicken gravies. So some examples are flour, cornstarch, potato starch is probably what Grandma would have used in this event. Are there any other questions, Paul?
there is. People are dying to know where you got the paper from.
The Jewish Food Society. Good plug. Love the Jewish Food Society. Any others? We're good? Good for now? Okay, so she would daydream about these recipes. She would daydream about the smells that I'm enjoying as well, I speak, not as we speak. Gertrude really showed up for her, and not just in that way, but when Gertrude was transferred to another Haysog factory in Czestochowa, which was another somewhat smaller concentration camp, she brought the women with her. And my grandma, actually, and my great grandma on the other side, but that's a story for another day. Both Malka, they went to Czestochowa, where she was liberated in January of 1945. She met my grandfather in Lodz, because that's where the second she could, she went to Lodz to try to find family. she ended up meeting my grandfather at a survivors board where they would visit every day. Actually, which is interesting, and I found this out much, much later in her life. She had met him once before, but she didn't know him very well. And they got to know each other at this survivors board, and they just clicked. They really hit it off. And they were married by September of 1945. They ended up moving in 1949 to Kansas. It took them quite some time to be able to, secure papers, but they ended up in Kansas, in Topeka, Kansas, sponsored by the Poses family. And then they went to a wedding in 1950 in Detroit, my Auntie Marilyn and Uncle Larry Wayne. And it was an eye-opening experience for them, realizing that there was an entire society of Holocaust survivors and European Jews with whom they could assimilate into American society with and thrive in American society with. So they were thrilled, and immediately he put in his 2 weeks notice and they moved to Detroit, where they put down roots, and they were, to say they were integral members of the community. I mean, they were pillars in the community. They had two hands, as my papa and grandma taught me. They had two hands, one with which to take and earn and receive, and one with which to give. And you have to use them equally. And they really did. Really did. So let's see. Potatoes. They're still a little bit hot. So I'm actually going to cool them for a little bit longer. Okay. I should mention before I move on to Grandma Esther's story that for those wondering about what happened to Gertrude Hoffman, she was on trial in 1946 at Nuremberg, and Grandma Mala came and testified on her behalf, and she was exonerated. So she ended up having descendants of her own and having hopefully a good life. I have yet to find out what's happening with her family. I'd like to, that's a goal of mine. So Lador Vador, Grandma survived. She married Papa, and they had my mom, Carolyn. And now I'm here. And I'm just so privileged and honored to teach these recipes. But they weren't created by Grandma Mala. They were created by, well, they weren't created by her mom either, but they were taught to her by her mom, Esther, who was born in Kojanets, a baker's daughter. Best challah, from what I've been told. She married at 17 years old. She was one of many siblings, and she had an incredibly diverse array of hobbies. One of them was painting and embroidering. I would like to show you something that she created, and one of the only two things that we have left of her. This is the Akedat Yitzhak, Binding of Isaac. She created this. We call it her tapestry, but it's really an oil painting with these incredibly iridescent, beautiful fibers embroidered through it. It's hanging in my mom's house, and I always spend time just soaking it in when I visit her. My great grandma Esther maintained a very busy and very joy-filled life. She was a mother first and foremost. She loved and she lost. She had a daughter. Her youngest daughter, Lola, died of health reasons in 1939, just before the war broke out. So she entered this war as a traumatized mother who was in mourning. She naturally had an emotional response to the invasion and tried to keep her children safe. She was scared when she didn't hear back from Yoel, her Yoel, my great grandfather. So she went back to Lodz, and then the ghetto was established in the spring of 1940, and she wasn't able to leave after that. She spent 4.5 years in the Lodz ghetto, which was renamed the Litzmannstadt ghetto by the Germans. Over 160,000 Jews lived in 2,300 homes in less than a square mile. So to say that the conditions were squalid just doesn't cover it. They lived in 100-year-old apartments that, for the most part, lacked central plumbing. And she had to do what she had to do to feed her family. From what I understand, my Auntie Franca, her eldest, was a very skilled thief at the time, not after the war, but during. And they had rations. They had potatoes, they had kohlrabi. She had to get creative with some cabbage for a few weeks when that's all they had. But potatoes were one of the few things they actually really did have. So this recipe is particularly special because she would have made it in the ghetto. We have, oh, Paul's reminded me of the potatoes. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so I think we're good. We're going to now mash, rice, or mill the potatoes. I have a masher that creates a really rustic mashed potato. You want one with finer holes, so that's why I have a mill. And because I see that we're actually a little pressed on time, I'm not going to mill it all. I'm just going to show you guys what it looks like to make some. Can I get it in there? Okay. It's going to come through the bottom into the bowl.
Stop sharing the screen.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm still sharing the screen, aren't I? Okay. So we're milling some potatoes. As you can see, it's not a glamorous job, but it's an important one if you want really, really silky potatoes. So that's enough for now. Obviously, you're going to want to mill all of them or mash all of them. You don't want to mash it too vigorously, though, because it can get a little gluey. So just be a little careful of that. So I have an egg here. It's likely going to be too much. So I'm just going to try to put half an egg in. Hey, Paul.
So the egg is absent.
The egg is absent. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So you need an egg. If you don't have an egg, you know what? You can do it without an egg. It's probably what Grandma Esther or Great Grandma Esther would have done in the ghetto. I don't think they had eggs readily available. You can make it without eggs. I've done it before. It might need a different ratio of flour. You probably won't need as much flour. So you want to mix this up. I obviously am not fancy. I use my hands, but you don't have to. We've got some flour. So like I said, start with about a half a cup and then mix it and then add about a tablespoon at a time, no more, because you don't want it to be too dry either. So the goal, what we're looking for here, actually, we're going to be able to see it better with this hand. So you want something that's soft and pliable, but isn't going to stick to your fingers too much. This is just a little bit too sticky. I can tell that it's very nearly there, but it's just too sticky. So we're just gonna add a little bit more, like I said. And then once we're at a better texture, we're just gonna knead it instead of mixing it. So like you would pasta dough or bread dough, you just kind of knead it. And at this point we can flour the surface and take it out of the bowl and put it right on the surface. Sticky fingers. Okay, so just knead it. And then as the flour incorporates, you may start to feel it get sticky again. So just add a little bit more flour if that happens. And then just start, when it gets, it's feeling nice. Want it all to be uniform. You don't want like too many creases on it so that you know that it's well mixed through. And then you just take like a chunk and on a floured surface again, you just roll it out with tender fingers. So you don't want to press too hard on it. You just roll it out until it's about this thick. And then you take either a small knife or a bench cutter and you exaggerate. So here, I'm just gonna, so here's what a diagonal would look like. You exaggerate it. So it's really, really diagonal, and then you go down the whole line. This way it creates a, like I said, an exaggerated diamond. They tend to hold better. I'm not sure why. So we're gonna do that down the whole line. Like that. Okay, so I'm actually just going to wash my hands for a sec. So if we have any more questions in the chat. This is a dough that will get stuck to your hands, so be prepared to have to scrub. Of course, I forgot to take off my wedding ring, but you know, whatever. Just dry my hands because you don't want really wet hands when you're dealing with Kopytkas. So at this point, I'm going to take the gravy pot and I'm going to put the mushrooms in it. And then put some of the water from the potatoes. And you're gonna bring it to a simmer. You don't want it too high, the heat, otherwise you're gonna burn the mushrooms and onions. But, okay.
Just let's change the focus.
Oh, for now, I think we can change the focus back to the other view. So at the very bottom of the bowl will be a lot more starchy water. So I like to pour out the top bit and leave the starchy water on the bottom. And then I pour that in. Actually, I can pour out a little more water. So we're gonna pour that in and that'll be the liquid for the gravy. So you want to bring that up to heat. That's what's gonna let it thicken. And then if it's not thick enough, by the time you're ready to eat it, what you can do is, if you're in a rush, and Grandma Mala would say, just be patient and leave it and let it thicken on its own. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So if you can't, what you're gonna do is you wanna mix water with either cornstarch or potato starch. I prefer potato starch, it's more authentic, it's what they would have used. But either one is fine, not everybody has potato starch. So cornstarch, if you don't have cornstarch, you can use flour. I prefer to use a starch. You want to make a slurry. So you want to mix it with a fork with water until it's dissolved. And then you can pour it into the gravy and let it sit for a minute. And that should thicken up the gravy. So that's also for the people who don't have the water anymore from the potatoes. So what you do with the Kopytkas, I'm just gonna stir the mushrooms for a sec. It's like I might need a slurry, so I'll teach you how to do it. So the Kopytkas, you're going to scoop them up and put them into the boiling water. Just toss them right in. You don't have to mix it. They're gonna stick to the bottom of the pot and that's fine. When they're done cooking in about a minute or two, they're gonna pop to the top and they're gonna start floating. And that's when you scoop them off, put them in a bowl and start another batch. You don't want too many in it at one time. Obviously the size of the pot will dictate the size of the batch that you put in, but you don't want to overcrowd the pot. So already I'm starting to see some of the Kopytkas floating. So I'm realizing I actually, oh, here we go. My handy bowl. Just gonna fish them right out and pop them right into the bowl. Don't worry too much about if they're moist or not. This pasta water is never a bad thing. So we're gonna do that a couple more times to show you guys. We'll roll out a snake, tender fingers. Don't want to be too rough with it. And then an exaggerated slant. So here's a 45-degree angle. You want to do more like a 30-degree angle. And you can guide with the other hand if it's easier. These are not looking as amazing. And it happens. I think I didn't exaggerate my slant enough. Yep. See? Okay, they're looking good. We're gonna pop them in. Okay. Another minute or two, and then they're gonna float right to the top. We've got some bubbling going on with the gravy. We're gonna let that just start bubbling a little more. So back to Grandma Esther. The ghetto liquidated in August of 1944. They were transported on cattle cars, 200 people to a car, with a bucket that very soon filled up. And that was all that they had to relieve themselves. They were crammed so tightly that the dead would just stay standing because they couldn't even fall. They emerged from the cattle cars having already been separated from the men. And my Grandma Esther emerged with her daughter Franca on one arm, clutching her, and her daughter Rosa on the other. Franca was sent one way, Esther was sent the other, and Rosa was sent with Franca. Why was she sent to a crematorium so quickly? She was young. She was in her early 40s. She was able-bodied. She took very good care of herself. She looked younger than she was. Was it because the guard or the person making the selections was bored? Did they choose a pattern? Because to them, they weren't humans? Was it because she was a mother and she had her daughters on her arms? You know, normally this was an issue for mothers of young children, but could that have been why he chose to send her to her death? Just because she was a Jew? I really ultimately will never know. Through their testimonies, her daughters believed that it was because they were holding on to her. I don't know if that was survivor's guilt or if that was wisdom. But what I do know is that even in her very last moments before her gruesome death, she was demonstrating what a devoted and loving mother she was. You know, that's who she was. She was a mom. So let's honor her by learning how to make her kopytkas. They are boiling, floating. I can actually show you what happens when you overcook kopytkas because they've been floating for a while. They get a little puffy. So you can see they're still going to be good. It's a forgiving recipe. Gravy's really kind of boiling. We want it to simmer, so I've turned that down a little bit. I can already tell that I'm going to need a little slurry, so I'm going to pull out my potato starch. Oh, you know what? I forgot to put the pinch of sugar into the gravy, which is fine if you add it now. It really doesn't matter when you add it, but I do want to add it because it gives a roundness to the whole dish. So I'm putting that in now, and then I'm going to make the slurry. So you want to take about a teaspoon at the most to start of the potato starch and put it into a little bowl or cup, and then add just enough water so that you can stir it in. So I've added just that amount of water, and then I just use the whatever teaspoon I used. And at first it's hard, and then it becomes really easy to mix through. And you just pour that in, and then I come back to temperature, and it should give you a nice thickness in your gravy. So just for a moment, I'd like to go back to Esther's photo. So just give me a hot second, and I'm going to call that up. Esther Weintraub. This is the only photo we actually have of my great grandma Esther. And I really agonized over whether to share this. Like I said, she never emerged from her bedroom without her sheitel, so that her kids never even saw her without her sheitel. But this photo was taken as her identification photo in the Lodz ghetto. So the Nazis forced her to take off her sheitel to dehumanize her as much as possible for this photograph. As you can see, her nostrils are flared, her lips are tight. Her piercing stare is gazing past the Nazi. She didn't look down. That's what really stands out to me, is that she did not look down. She was probably embarrassed, and she was as exposed and vulnerable as maybe she'd ever been in her entire life. But she chose fierce defiance. And I could not be more proud to be her descendant. I'd like to introduce you to her daughters who survived. The three sisters, Auntie Franca, Auntie Rosa, and Grandma Mala. So in the middle picture on the left is Auntie Franca, and in the middle is Auntie Rosa, and on the right is Grandma Mala. They were inseparable. The big joke was that if one had a headache, all three took an aspirin. So you can imagine just how much they cherished each other after Auntie Franca and Auntie Rosa didn't think that anybody else in their family survived. And my grandma didn't think anybody in her family survived. So when they discovered each other, they never let go. I can smell my grandma's kitchen. The smells are really transporting me back to Franklin. One of the key ingredients in her cooking, the gravy is perfectly thick by now, by the way, was dill. So I'm actually going to show you something that I hesitate to call her her caregiver. She was her caregiver, but she was really her family. Allah, she taught me this. So what I like to do with dill is I like to chop it up and put it in a container in the freezer. And then what you can do is you can just like kind of fluff it a little bit. And then you can use it as if it's fresh dill. And it tastes like fresh dill. It doesn't lose any of its qualities or flavor. So I'm just gonna ladle some gravy over my Kopytkas. Put a little dill. And then I like to chop a little bit of chives. Kept them in the fridge because they're not going to keep if they're out this whole time, but in the fridge they'll keep nicely. So I'm just going to take a little scissors. Just chop a little bit, not too much, just enough for a nice garnish and a little bit of allium flavor. So, can you see it? Actually, you know what? Before I dig in, I'm gonna, because otherwise it's not gonna keep. That's one of the tricks. You don't want to keep it out too long. So, oh my goodness. It smells just like hers. It's like she made it herself. Tender, just pillows that just melt in your mouth, and the gravy is, oh, so good. When I recreate these recipes, I'm really grasping for the flavors and the aromas of Esther's kitchen and of Grandma Mala's. I want to bring them into my own. Now into yours. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing the mitzvah of bringing Grandma and Grandma Esther back to life. It's such an honor to work with the Zeckelman Holocaust Center. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to OCC's Culinary Studies Institute and to all of you for helping me to bring them to life in our homes and in our hearts. Thank you.
Becca, thank you so much for sharing the recipe and your stories about Mala and Esther. Wow, I really want to try the recipe, but just I'm also really inspired. What amazing stories of strength and survival, and you did such an amazing job of teaching us the recipe while also sharing these clearly very difficult stories. So yeah, thank you so much. We have a bit of time for some questions. So I was just gonna ask really quickly if these recipes were just literally taught to you and passed down and they exist in your mind, or if you do keep them written down. I'm just thinking of my own mom's little recipe box with her recipes.
Yeah, so they both are true. My grandma wrote them down herself. I'm gonna try to call up a photo that I have of one of her recipes so that you have an idea of how legible these weren't. It actually might be easier if I do it on the other screen. So she wrote them down in not really in English, and a little bit in Polish, a little bit in Yiddish. She didn't write measurements. She wrote one and then the word flour, like something you would pick out of the ground. There's no cup, there's no tablespoon, there's no idea of really what you're supposed to put in. I'm so sorry. I'm just getting the photo up. It's worth looking at.
No, I think that means that, you know, to really get it right, you had to learn it from the source. And I loved when you used the word cultural lexicon. I think that that's so accurate, that these recipes they're not just recipes for food, but they're really integral to your family and the Jewish culture as a whole coming out of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, they really absolutely were. I'm so sorry. I'm having a really hard time with technology today.
Can I ask you a question from someone who is watching, Tracy? So she was just curious if the dish would have been served as the primary meal, or would have been served alongside something else, a side dish?
There was never just a primary meal in her home. So there were always tons of options. She had, I think partly because she had 7 children, my great grandma Esther had to make a lot of different options. The kids ate what they were given, but I'm sure there were preferences along the way. My grandma made a number of things. We normally, like I said, have these for holidays. So she and her 2 sisters made a feast, an absolute smorgasbord of food. So it was, there were tons of options. Our plates were full before we could even try everything. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And then someone had asked, Brianna asked, can you store it in a freezer?
Absolutely.
A bag?
Absolutely, yeah. You can, what I like to do is I use these things called super cubes. They're like silicone compartments. You can freeze them in and then you pop them out and they're kind of in like cubes. You could put it in a bag. You could put it in a container in the freezer. You can refrigerate it for probably 4 or 5 days. You can freeze it for a few months.
Okay. And then the most important question was, someone wanted to know where you get your schmaltz.
My schmaltz, I make my schmaltz. Here, I'll show you my schmaltz. When I make chicken, I always save the schmaltz, always. So this is my handy dandy thing of schmaltz. It's obviously been used. Schmaltz keeps for a long time, just saying. So save your schmaltz. You can also buy it at the grocery store, by the way.
Sure,
It's
sure.
normally in the kosher food section.
Well, I think let me see, one more question. Yeah, someone asked if we'll be sending out the recipe, which we should be tomorrow.
Yeah, with the estimate, don't worry.
But yeah, your husband did a great job of doing the Q&A while we were working, so I think he
Thank you so much, Paul. Round of applause for Paul.
Took care of a lot of that. But yes, so again, thank you so much for doing with this for us. It was
Thank
really
you. I'm sorry for going over the time. It's
no, absolutely.
a little emotional still.
I don't think anyone wanted you to stop or to rush you. And it's yeah, I just thank you for allowing us to help keep the memories alive, which is what we do at the Holocaust Center. And I know that everyone just looking at the chat was really enjoying it. So that was absolutely wonderful. And I look forward to trying the recipe myself at home.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thanks,
Becca. But yeah, so to everyone still watching, our next event is on August 7th. It's a virtual event with Dr. Raphael Madoff. He will discuss his book, The Rabbi of Buchenwald, which explores the story of Rabbi Herschel Schechter, a U.S. Army chaplain who was part of the unit that liberated Buchenwald. You can learn more about the event and register at our website, holocaustcenter.org. Before you exit the program, we'd like to leave you with a short clip of Mala that Becca wanted to share with us. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Scheide wohnen, scheide sterben, den Himmel tun, hat mir sie geschickt. The song that she taught me when I was a little girl. Jacek taught me, she sang that song.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, she said, Himmel tun. God sent a gift.
Aww.
Yeah. Himmel tun. And it's shining, oily, shining, saying, this what we are seeing to be. So thought this made him love it because so much what he wanted. Tuna, that gift from God